The Centauri Medical Institute was the kind of place where everything smelled like antiseptic regret and quiet terror. A perfect cube suspended in the vacuum above the crust of Elter VI, it glittered like a diamond and had roughly the same emotional warmth. Inside, a species-diverse collection of the galaxy's best and brightest, gathered not out of compassion, but for the prestige of being able to say, I once removed a Gralaxian thorax sac while the patient was still conscious. Today was internal organ observation 401 and first phase med trainee Zilthar Vun, a gangly, pastel blue insectoid with 3 compound eyes and a jaw that clicked whenever he was anxious, so always, was about to lose his mind. Not because of the complex arterial rerouting simulation, not even because his surgical drone kept mistaking his antennae for suture points. No, Zilthar was coming apart because of the subject assigned to Table 9. A human. Strapped down, shirt off, heart rate steady. I don't understand, Zilthar muttered, his translator chirping out a stilted voice with just a hint of nervous chirp. Why isn't he screaming? The instructor, a stern, jellyfish-like Ilardran named Vrarkala, floated by and peered at the human. The anesthesia field isn't calibrated for Terran physiology. He should be experiencing pain levels consistent with extreme flaying, possibly worse. Exactly, Zilthar sputtered. He hasn't even blinked. Look, I'm making an exploratory incision and... The human tilted his head, looked down at the glowing scalpel blade slicing open his abdomen, and raised an eyebrow. This, he said casually, I've had worse. And then the smile. That smug, infuriatingly calm smile. Zilthar's hands jittered. Worse than this is a full abdominal entry. I can see your pancreas. Yeah, the human replied, eyes tracking Zilthar with the relaxed boredom of someone watching paint dry. Ever been stung by a Flarth wasp swarm on Europa in January? No. Exactly, carry on. In the observation dome above, hundreds of other med students and staff leaned forward. Whispers erupted across species. The footage was already going viral on Galnet. That is not normal behavior for a pain-accepting species, one blobular plasmoid muttered, gently oscillating with confusion. Humans are built different, another student whispered, as though invoking a dark myth. I heard one once bit a Emraxi executioner just to see what it tasted like. That one down there is chewing gum, hissed someone in horror, while being dissected. Back in the lab, Zilthar cleared his throat, unsure what to do. Subject 47. Call me Nate. Right, Nate, I am proceeding with the liver extraction. You will, of course, experience systemic trauma equivalent to. Look, I appreciate the warning, clicky, but unless that scalpel turns into a chainsaw and starts playing opera while tap dancing on my spleen, I'm not gonna bat an eye. You're blading copiously. Nate looked down. That explains the tickle. Cool, proceed. Zilthar hesitated, his antennae trembled. He reached over and double-checked the data slate. Everything was nominal, except for Nate. Nate was a logical black hole into which sense and procedure were collapsing. What are you made of? He asked. Regret, caffeine, and spite, Nate replied cheerfully. Mostly spite, actually. You want to talk about pain? I went through a family Thanksgiving with my ex-wife's parents, in Wisconsin, in the snow, with a broken collarbone and only boxed wine. This, he jerked his head toward the scalpel now tickling his kidney. This is a spa day. Zilthar made a sound, like a tiny lawnmower stalling out. Zilthar, Instructor Vrarkala said, hovering beside him, your subject is not reacting appropriately. He may be damaged. I think he's too functional, Zilthar whispered. He keeps making these noises with his throat, like laughter but darker. I can hear you, Nate said. I'm not deaf, just emotionally numb. How are you not screaming? Nate looked them all in the eye, cracked his neck, and said, because I'm from Ohio. A long silence fell over the entire lab. Then someone in the observation dome whispered, oh stars, he's one of the Midwest variants. Zilthar stepped back, flustered, unsure if continuing the procedure was a brilliant act of medical exploration or the first step in summoning a demon. Shall I proceed to organ reversal therapy? He asked. Sure, Nate said, but could you grab me a soda? All this poking around is making me thirsty. The scalpel dropped from Zilthar's trembling hand. 10 minutes later, security was called, not for Nate, but for the med students, several of whom had fainted or entered minor fugue states from observing a creature that, by all logical accounts, should not exist. Meanwhile, Nate sat up, shirtless and slightly annoyed. "Are we done yet? I got bingo night in half an hour." "Bingo night," Zilthar whispered, as if it were a curse. "You don't know suffering," Nate said, standing up with a fresh set of stitches and more dignity than most monarchs, "until you've missed out on a $40 jackpot because Doris used a free space wildcard. Madness. Absolute madness." Zilthar turned to instructor VRR Kala. "I don't want to be a doctor anymore. I want to study them. I want to understand how a creature can giggle during a spleen biopsy." VRR Kala, whose translucent skin was now faintly quivering, nodded once. "Approved, but you'll need a field license." "Where?" "You'll have to go there, to their planet." Zilthar stared down at Nate, who was now humming the Jaws theme while flipping off a security drone. "Earth," he said, like invoking a primal fear. "Yes," said VRR Kala, "to Earth." Zilthar whimpered. 6 weeks later, Zilthar Vun stood in the arrivals terminal of Earth's O'Hare Interstellar. He was already afraid. The air was thick, humid, and smelled faintly of burned meat, ground coffee, ozone, and he was fairly sure hot glue. Humans bustled around him with organized chaos, shouting into handheld devices, sipping molten beverages from disposable cylinders, and wearing articles of clothing that defied taxonomy. One was dressed entirely in denim. Another had shaved only half their head and painted the other half. Someone else was wearing socks with sandals. And not a single one of them appeared to be in any pain. Zilthar clutched his translator sphere tightly, wings tucked in defensively, and stared at a sign written in 12 Earth languages, 3 pictographs, and 1 passive-aggressive emoji. "Why," he whispered, "does this place have an emergency emotional support karaoke lounge?" His thoughts were interrupted by a sudden shout. "Hey, CLICKY." Nate barreled through the crowd wearing cargo shorts, aviators, and a grin like someone who had just tricked a god into signing a gym membership. "You made it," Nate said, grabbing Zilthar's upper appendages in some sort of hyper-aggressive greeting ritual. "Welcome to the madhouse." "I am here to study you," Zilthar managed, once his joints stopped vibrating. "To understand how a being like you processes pain, stress, and surgical trauma without exhibiting traditional reactions." "Great," Nate said, slapping him on the back hard enough to cause an involuntary exoskeletal click. "You're coming to a barbecue." "What's a barbecue?" "Meat, fire, social anxiety, and someone always gets injured. You'll love it." The barbecue was held in Nate's backyard, which was a rectangle of grass surrounded by wooden fencing and an unreasonable number of inflatable flamingos. A smoldering metallic pit spewed smoke that Zilthar suspected violated at least 9 intergalactic clean air codes. Nate introduced him to a blur of humans with names like Big Mike, Hot Dog Steve, and Karen, but not that Karen. "Did you bring the alien?" someone yelled. "I did," Nate said, gesturing grandly. "Behold, Zilthar Vun of the Centauri Med Guild." Big Mike gave him a beer. Zilthar had no idea what to do with it. He scanned the environment, documenting behavior. Laughter, yelling, competitive frisbee injuries, meat-based rituals, and the occasional explosion from a questionable fireworks experiment. "This is chaos," he muttered. "This," Nate said proudly, "is home." Then someone stepped on a rake, got a black eye, and refused medical attention. Zilthar was scribbling furiously into his data slate. By the 3rd day of observation, he'd witnessed a minor car accident resolved with rock, paper, scissors. A child deliberately eating a jalapeno to impress another child. A group of teenagers voluntarily doing something called the Cinnamon Challenge. Nate attempting to replace his own molar with a power drill to save on dentist bills. Zilthar tried to report this to the Centauri Institute. They thought he was exaggerating. So he sent them video. The Council of Galactic Medical Ethics held an emergency session. One vomited. Another went silent for 11 hours and returned with a beard. Meanwhile, Nate was guiding Zilthar through a trip to the DMV. "Observe," Nate said, "as this den of despair attempts to crush the human soul." The line was 2 hours long. A child was crying. A man had fallen asleep and was snoring into a form labeled B42, application for temporary license after Moose incident. Zilthar asked, "Why don't you leave?" "Because I must renew my license," Nate said grimly. "It is the law." "But the suffering." Nate smiled. "We were forged in this. You think pain comes from scalpels and lasers. Nah, buddy. True pain is standing in this line with no phone signal and a vending machine that eats your last dollar." Zilthar started shaking again. The next week, Nate volunteered them both for a tough mutter. Zilthar assumed it was a creature. It was not. It was a 12-kilometer obstacle course through mud, barbed wire, and emotional trauma. Halfway through, soaked, bruised, and having been screamed at by something called a coach named Chad, Zilthar wheezed. Why would anyone do this voluntarily? "To prove we can," Nate shouted, leaping over a flaming wall and helping an accountant out of a mud pit. "Because pain is just weakness leaving the body, and because we're dumb as hell." Zilthar collapsed, stuck halfway in a tire tunnel, questioning every life decision he'd ever made. Nate dragged him out, handed him an energy drink, and said, "You're doing great, buddy." The worst part. Zilthar felt good. On day 30, he submitted his report. Preliminary conclusion. Human pain tolerance is not based on physical resilience, but a cultural immunity to logic and self-preservation. Notable phrases heard before injury include, "Watch this, I bet I can," and "Hold my beer." Recommend observing SBCIMNS in contextual environments of stress, e.g., Thanksgiving, Black Friday SALES, Family Road TRIPS. Also, THEY eat hot sauce, like it owes them money. The Institute replied, "Continue research, undercover, deep field immersion." They sent him a human wardrobe, an Earth identity, and a government-issued Honda Civic. He was officially a grad student from Wisconsin. The disguise worked too well. Within hours, 3 people asked him about cheese preferences. He picked sharp cheddar. They nodded in solemn approval. He was in. There are few things in the galaxy more terrifying than an alien surgical probe malfunctioning mid-operation. But Nate's Aunt Patty came close. She was 5'2", wore a sweater that could absorb solar radiation, and had the tactical awareness of a war general disguised as a sweet Midwestern retiree. "Now, Zil," she said, handing him a plate stacked with 3 types of casserole and something labeled Jell-O salad, "we don't stand on ceremony in this family. You'll eat until your ancestors feel full. I have no digestive tract compatible with." Ate. He ate. The green cube trembled like it knew things. This was Thanksgiving. Zilthar had survived bone saws, toxic mud races, and human bureaucracy. But nothing prepared him for an extended family gathering with emotional minefields hidden beneath every conversation. "Do you have a girlfriend yet? Why aren't you married? Still studying, must be nice, not working. I once fought off an Androxy brain leech in zero gravity," Zilthar tried to say, but was too busy being force-fed pumpkin pie. Across the table, Nate winked at him and whispered, "Pain is temporary, family is forever, until they start talking politics." 3 relatives shouted simultaneously about taxes. Someone brought up crypto. The dog threw up a crayon. Zilthar's eye stalks twitched in every direction. He pinged the Centauri Institute with a distress signal. The automated response was, "You got yourself into this." After dinner, Nate led him into the garage. Inside, a broken snowblower, 5 half-empty cans of paint, and something called Dad's Workbench, which appeared to be a shrine to projects never completed. "This is where legends are born," Nate said, "and where no actual work gets done." He pulled down a dusty box. Inside, old photographs, childhood artifacts, a Game Boy cartridge labeled Doom. This, Nate said, is the secret to human durability. He held up a bike helmet with a dent in it. Fell out of a tree when I was 8, landed on a rake, then got hit by a football. That night I had mac and cheese and watched cartoons until I passed out. That's why we don't scream anymore, Zil. The pain, it's a lifestyle. Zilthar blinked. You're conditioned to ignore suffering. No, we embrace it, wrap it in duct tape, make it a personality trait. Someone says that looks dangerous. We say, yeah, buddy, but it builds character. Your civilization is not based on logic. It's built on emotional spite and trial by fire nostalgia. You're finally getting it. Later, Nate took him to Walmart on Black Friday. That was a mistake. The doors opened at 5:00 a.m. By 5:01, Zilthar had witnessed 4 fights over a discounted air fryer. One woman using a pool noodle as a flail. A man wearing reindeer antlers shouting for the deals while diving into a display of televisions. Why are they doing this? Zilthar gasped from beneath a toppled display of $8 toasters. Because, Nate said, balancing on a hover scooter while dual-wielding coupon books, capitalism. This is madness. This is America. They escaped with minor injuries, 1 lava lamp, and a deep sense of spiritual confusion. Zilthar filed an emergency update to his medical thesis titled Human Endurance, a study in consumer-based combat rituals. On day 70, a freak blizzard hit. Don't worry, Nate said, shoveling snow in shorts. It's just a little squall. The news called it Snowmageddon. Power went out, pipes froze. One neighbor tried to melt ice using a hairdryer plugged into a portable generator, causing a blackout on the entire block. Instead of panicking, Nate lit candles, boiled soup on a grill, and played acoustic guitar until the neighbors came over and had a full-on Snowden party. How? Zilthar asked, staring at the impromptu conga line forming in the living room. Are you still having fun? Nate handed him a marshmallow on a stick. Because in the face of disaster, humans have 2 options, cry or throw a party. You choose party. Every time. Zilthar's final immersion came at the emergency room. Not as a student. As a patient. He had slipped on ice chasing a raccoon that had stolen his sandwich. He broke 2 ribs and sprained a limb. When the nurse asked him his pain level from 1 to 10, he said, 15. She nodded, okay, so like a 6. What? Standard scale, you're not crying, so it's not urgent. I'm bleeding internally. We'll get to you after the guy with the snowblower foot. Zilthar looked over. The man was eating a donut and smiling. Had worse, he said cheerfully. Zilthar finally understood. It wasn't that humans didn't feel pain. They just refused to acknowledge its authority. The aliens came on a Tuesday. They arrived in a sleek chrome diplomatic cruiser shaped like a spoon and parked it gently in the parking lot of a Buffalo Wild Wings. 3 minivans crashed into it within the hour. Why, whispered Ambassador G.R.R. Toon, a majestic 7-limbed mantifex in ceremonial robes, are your people this chaotic? Because, Nate said, sipping a beer in one hand and waving a chicken wing in the other, you landed during happy hour. The Galactic Medical Assembly had approved a cultural observation mission after receiving Zilthar's reports. They expected war zones, trauma centers, lab-grade agony. What they got instead was Nate, in cargo shorts, running an orientation PowerPoint titled, So You Want to Understand Humans Without Crying Blood. Slide 1, a photo of Nate wrestling a goose. Slide 2, an X-ray of someone with a traffic cone lodged in their colon. Slide 3, there are no laws on Florida man. Zilthar stood beside him, visibly twitching, trying to explain context between Nate's increasingly unhinged statements. Why is this one inserting fireworks into his own mouth? Asked G.R.R. Toon, watching security footage. Local ritual, Independence Day. Is he laughing? Yes, he thinks it's funny. GRR stared at the screen, then at Zilthar. Why did you not warn us? I did. You thought I was exaggerating. Another screen lit up. A human attempted to skateboard off a roof into a kiddie pool, missed, landed in a grill, gave a thumbs up. He survived. Yes. He's smiling. Yes. GRR eye stalk drooped. I don't understand. These creatures treat agony as performance art. That's not wrong. To give the aliens a deeper experience, Nate took them on a cultural field trip. First stop, a minor league baseball game. They watched as a man in a hot dog costume fought the mascot. They watched people eat nachos with their bare hands. They watched a man throw out his shoulder, attempting to catch a foul ball with his face. The crowd roared in approval. GRR turned to Nate. Is this a sports match or a gladiatorial contest? Yes, Nate replied. Second stop, a Renaissance fair. Ambassador Vux of the Crystalline Tsar Nations was emotionally compromised by the presence of a man in armor yelling, "Huzzah!" while jousting on a Segway. It is not accurate, Vux whispered. It is fun, Nate said. Then a woman in elf ears challenged the ambassador to a turkey leg eating contest. She won. He was still chewing by the time the fair closed. Back at the observation dome, set up hastily inside a red roof inn, the alien delegates tried to make sense of their notes. What does yard sale mean? Asked one, pointing to a photo of a driveway covered in broken appliances and suspicious Tupperware. Why does grits exist? Why are there so many songs about trucks, dogs, and heartbreak? Do they worship bacon? They elect their leaders with dance videos and memes, whispered a trembling Verka, a species known for surviving gamma storms. I saw a debate where someone shouted, "You mad, bro?" This planet, another delegate muttered, is a walking violation of logic, law, and dental hygiene. Nate strolled in holding a funnel cake. You guys enjoying the tour? Silence. Wanna go to a demolition derby next? Later that night, GRR cornered Zilthar. I must know, truly, deeply, what drives them. How do they keep surviving their own idiocy? Zilthar took a long, shuddering breath. They are fueled by denial, stubbornness, and snack food. Their medical system is broken, their infrastructure outdated, and their response to mortal peril is often bet. And yet, they keep going. GRR stared out the window. A frat boy in a banana costume was running from a cop on a Segway. This is a prison planet, the ambassador whispered. No, Zilthar said grimly, it's home. The alien delegation prepared to leave. We came seeking understanding, GRR said in the farewell statement. We leave with existential dread. Your species is a paradox. You fear nothing and yet laugh at everything. You should not exist. You defy every model of survivability, and yet you persist. Nate smiled, mouth full of beef jerky. Because this, he said, tapping a bruised arm from a barstool fall earlier, I've had worse. Every delegate flinched. GRR turned to Zilthar. What will you do now? Zilthar straightened his jacket, inhaled the rich scent of burnt cheese and gasoline, and said, I'm staying. You're insane. I fit in. The Galactic Stability Council had seen enough. In an emergency midnight session held aboard the station Lawbringer IX, high above the moons of Trenzor, they voted unanimously to implement Protocol Omega Null, quarantine Earth. This species is a danger to itself, barked High Arbiter Drawn, slamming a gavel made from the crystallized regrets of extinct civilizations, and to the rest of the galaxy. Agreed, came the chorus from over 200 members. Contain them before the chaos spreads. Subdirector Glith, watching a live feed of a spring break foam party, whimpered. They have no natural predator, only traffic cones and their own ambitions. Back on Earth, Nate and Zilthar were at a monster truck rally. You know, Nate shouted over the roar of Gravedigger XL, flipping over a pyrotechnic ramp. I felt a disturbance in the bureaucracy. Define disturbance, Zilthar said, ducking a flying nacho. Nate held up his phone. A Galactic news alert blinked on screen. Earth QARANTINED. Travel restricted. Chaos CONTAINED. Well, Nate said, grinning like someone who just found out his garage was now a sovereign nation. Guess we're not allowed to leave anymore. I can't go home. Nope, welcome to the rest of your life, buddy. Better buy a grill. Zilthar sat in silence for a moment, then shrugged. At least the food here has flavor, even if it's fatal. Ah, boy. Meanwhile, the council prepared the containment shield, a planetary-scale energy net powered by 4 dying stars and a committee of overthinking engineers. It was scheduled to go live at noon Earth Standard Time. They didn't count on what Earth would do next. Because Earth had noticed the quarantine. And Earth did not take it well. Within hours, TikTok was flooded with We Are the Virus videos. A man in Idaho tried to lasso a satellite dish in protest. Conspiracy forums exploded with threads like, "Aliens hate our freedom. This is because of the metric system. Wake up, sheeple, the moon's been watching us." A bar in Texas declared independence and renamed itself Free Galaxy. Florida responded by building a rocket out of beer cans and duct tape. It made it 20 feet into the air, then exploded in a shower of Coors and patriotism. "They can't contain America," screamed the local news anchor, shirtless and waving sparklers. The alien observers watching the footage fainted. Desperate to calm the situation, the council authorized a diplomatic message. It was translated into 300 languages, encoded in subspace, and transmitted via neutrino burst. It reached Earth, and Earth turned it into a remix. Within 6 hours, the "please remain calm, you are not being invaded" message was the backing track for a dance challenge. Nate was on top of a mailbox, flossing. "This is how we win," he said. "By mocking a galactic superpower?" Zilthar asked, now fully dressed in jeans, a hoodie, and holding a root beer float. "Exactly, they don't know how to handle ungovernable energy. Chaos is our brand. Won't they just shut it all down?" "Oh, they'll try." The containment field powered up. The sky shimmered. A deep hum pulsed across the globe. It held for 32 seconds. Then an amateur ham radio operator in Des Moines pinged it with an unauthorized signal modulated through a microwave oven, accidentally triggering a resonance cascade. The shield buckled. A synchronized fleet of rogue drones, launched by a teenage robotics club in Oregon, hacked the failsafe and reprogrammed the energy net to display a giant emoji. It was the laughing, crying face. The council watched as their containment system was reduced to a meme. Drawn stood up, eyes hollow. They are not a species, they are a storm in genes. In the aftermath, Earth was no longer quarantined. It was given a formal designation, Galactic Anomaly, Class Red. Travel was no longer restricted. Instead, every ship entering Earth's orbit received a mandatory warning. Caution, Planet 3 of Sol system exhibits nonlinear causality, weaponized absurdity, and an unprecedented tolerance for trauma, both physical and emotional. Engage at your own risk. Below the warning, a gif of a man being hit by a rubber duck while riding a unicycle on fire. The council gave up. Earth was uncontainable. And somewhere in a backyard, Nate was teaching Zilthar how to grill bratwursts over a bonfire made from a broken fence and a printer that refused to connect via Wi-Fi. "Zil," he said, flipping sausages, "you've come a long way. I've watched humans duct tape their own wounds, consume fermented dairy products, and turn emotional suppression into performance art. I've been concussed by inflatable furniture. I've been hit on by 3 different Karens, and I've begun to like it." "Exactly." Nate handed him a beer. Zilthar clinked bottles with him. "Cheers to the pain." "To laughing at it," Nate said. They stared at the stars. A spaceship crash-landed in the neighbor's yard. A man climbed out and yelled, "I was told there'd be buffalo wings." "Get in here," Nate shouted. "We got extra." And in the records of the galaxy, one quote stood immortalized under species. Human, sub-entry, pain response. "This I've had worse."